I saved $60,000 to buy my first home, but my mother barged into my wealth management firm demanding I use every penny to bail my sister out of county jail. When I refused, she threatened to destroy my career and tell my bosses I was embezzling client funds. What she did not know was that the very reason my sister was in handcuffs was because I had already reported her to the FBI for wire fraud. My chilling reply silenced the room right before the federal agents walked in. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to set a hard boundary with a toxic family member. The sharp smack of my mother Brenda slapping her heavy leather handbag onto my pristine glass desk echoed through my corner office. I did not even flinch. My name is Kiara. I am 33 years old, and I am the branch manager of a high-end wealth management firm in downtown Atlanta. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was in the middle of reviewing a quarterly portfolio for a major client when my mother bulldozed past my terrified receptionist. Her face was flushed with a mixture of rage and that familiar toxic entitlement I had known my entire life. She slammed a crumpled yellow carbon copy paper directly over my keyboard. It was a Fulton County Jail intake form. Chloe is in a holding cell. My mother hissed, her voice vibrating with panic, but her eyes locked onto me with pure demand. Bail is set at $60,000. You work at a bank. You manage millions. Transfer the money to the bondsman right now before they move your sister to general population. I slowly took my hands off my keyboard. I did not look at the paper. I looked at the woman who had spent my entire life making me feel like I was nothing more than an automated teller machine for her golden child. I do not work at a bank, Mom. I manage private wealth, I said, my voice dangerously calm. And even if I did, I am not draining my personal savings account to bail a 25-year-old adult out of jail. What did Chloe do this time? It does not matter what she did, my mother shouted, waving her hands frantically. She is your sister, your own flesh and blood. Are you really going to sit up here in your fancy little suit in this glass tower and let her rot in a cage? Yes, I replied flatly. I am. My mother gasped, clutching her chest as if I had physically struck her. This was her favorite performance, the aggrieved, suffering matriarch. You are cold, Kiara. You have always been cold. That $60,000 is just sitting in your account doing nothing. Chloe needs it. That money is my down payment, I said, leaning forward, refusing to let her control the airspace in my office. It took me 4 years of working 60-hour weeks to save that money for a house. It is not an emergency fund for the mistakes Chloe makes. If she needed bail money, she should have asked her husband. Where is Tyler? The mention of my brother-in-law made my mother tighten her jaw. Tyler was a sore subject, though my mother would die before admitting it. He is busy, she snapped, quickly deflecting the question. He is in the middle of a crucial funding round for his tech startup. He cannot be distracted by legal fees right now. You are single. You do not have a husband or kids to support. You can buy a house next year. Right now, family comes first. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Family comes first. Just like family came first when you drained my college fund. Do not you dare bring that up? She pointed a shaking, manicured finger at me. That was 15 years ago. It was $18,000. I fired back, my tone sharpening into a blade. $18,000 that Grandpa left me for my tuition at Howard University. And you forged my signature, drained the account, and bought Chloe a brand new car for her high school graduation because you did not want her driving a used vehicle to college. I stood up, towering over the desk. I had to work 3 shifts as a waitress, smelling like fry grease, until 3 in the morning just to pay for my textbooks. You told me then that Chloe deserved a nice start in life and that I was strong enough to figure it out on my own. Well, guess what, Mom? I figured it out. I built this life on my own, so Chloe can figure out how to make bail on her own. You resent her, my mother yelled, her facade of panic entirely replaced by venom. You have always been jealous of her because she found a good man like Tyler, and you are pushing 34 with nothing but a corporate title. Jealous, I smirked, shaking my head at the pure delusion. Mom, Tyler is a parasite. His tech startup is a joke. He has been pre-revenue for 3 years. The only thing he has successfully launched is the massive credit card debt under the name of Chloe. They are broke. And now she is in jail. So tell me, what exactly am I jealous of? Before my mother could open her mouth to scream another insult, the heavy glass door of my office swung open again. My terrified receptionist stood in the doorway, trembling. Ms. Chiara. I am so sorry, I told him he could not go back here without an appointment, she stammered. It is fine, Brenda. A smug nasal voice interrupted. Tyler pushed past the receptionist, adjusting his suit cuffs. He looked around with an arrogant sneer. I waved my receptionist off and told her to close the heavy glass door behind her. Tyler stood in the center of my office like he owned the entire building. He was wearing a navy suit that looked expensive, but I knew for a fact it was purchased on a high-interest credit card my sister was still paying off. He leaned over my desk, placing both hands flat on the polished glass, trying to use his height to intimidate me. Look, Chiara, he said, using his smooth, corporate pitch voice. I know you and your mother have your differences, but right now we need to operate as a team. Chloe made a minor mistake. The legal system is blowing it out of proportion. We need that $60,000 to get her out today so we can handle this quietly. I did not lean back in my chair. I held his gaze without blinking. A minor mistake, Tyler? I asked. The police do not set a $60,000 bail for a minor mistake. What exactly is she charged with? Tyler waved his hand dismissively, as if federal criminal charges were just a parking ticket. It is a misunderstanding with some wire transfers, he said smoothly. My lawyer is already on it. But my capital is currently tied up in the Series A funding round for my software application. I cannot liquidate my assets without spooking my venture capital investors. Therefore, we are coming to you. Think of this as an angel investment. You give us the 60 grand for the bail, and I will write you a promissory note. When my startup goes public, I will pay you back with a 10% return. I stared at him for a long moment, letting the sheer audacity of his proposal hang in the dead air of the room. Tyler, I said slowly, your startup is a ghost. You do not have investors. You have a sleek website and a rented co-working space that you pay for using the platinum card Chloe opened in her name last year. You have not produced a single line of viable code in 3 years. Your application is a poorly designed aggregator that nobody wants to buy. You are not tying up capital in a Series A round. You are completely broke. And now you want me to hand over my life savings to bail out your wife, so you do not have to admit to your country club friends that you are a fraud. His pale face turned a mottled shade of red. The smooth corporate facade cracked instantly, revealing the fragile and arrogant boy underneath. You do not know the first thing about venture capital, Chiara, he spat, dropping the friendly brother-in-law act completely. You sit here in this nice office because this firm needed to meet a diversity quota. You manage the money of other people. You do not build anything. You do not take risks. That is why you will always be a lowly employee. You do not understand how real business works. If you were a real visionary, you would see that this is a temporary cash flow issue. I smiled. It was a genuine, bright smile that made his jaw clench. You are absolutely right, Tyler, I said calmly. I do not take risks with my money. I manage risk. That is literally my job title. And my professional risk assessment of you is that you are a terrible investment. I am not giving you a single dime. My mother, who had been uncharacteristically quiet while her precious son-in-law tried to negotiate, suddenly stepped forward. Her eyes were dark and desperate. She slapped her hand down next to the jail intake form. You listen to me, you selfish little brat, she hissed, her voice trembling with genuine hatred. You are going to sign a withdrawal slip right now. If you do not, I am going to walk right out of this office and find the senior partner of this firm. I am going to tell them that you have been siphoning money from the accounts of your clients to fund your lavish lifestyle. I am your mother. Who do you think they will believe? A concerned mother trying to protect the public or a greedy employee? They will fire you on the spot, Chiara. They will strip your financial licenses. You will lose this fancy office, your career, and that house you are saving for." The room went completely silent. Even Tyler looked momentarily surprised by my mother going straight for the nuclear option, but he quickly recovered. He crossed his arms and gave me a smug nod of approval. They had backed me into a corner. In their minds, I had two choices: surrender the money I had worked 4 brutal years to save, or lose the career I had spent a decade building. My mother leaned closer, her breath smelling of stale coffee and desperation. "Give us the money, Kiara. Do not ruin your own life just because you are too stubborn to help your sister." I looked at my mother, absorbing the chilling reality that she was willing to destroy my entire existence just to shield Chloe from the consequences of her own actions. I slowly reached across my desk. My mother smiled, a triumphant and greedy smirk spreading across her face. Tyler let out a heavy breath he had been holding. But I did not reach for my pen. I did not reach for a withdrawal slip. Instead, I reached for my desk phone. The red light on line 1 had just started flashing. It was a direct internal call from the cybersecurity and fraud division of my firm. I pressed the speaker button, turning the volume all the way up so the sound would echo off the glass walls. The voice of David, the head of digital security, filled the room. "Kiara?" He said, his tone dead serious. "The FBI just confirmed receipt of the dossier you sent over yesterday. They executed the arrest warrant for your sister this morning." The blood drained from the face of my mother. Tyler stumbled backward, a half step. The smirk wiped clean off his face, replaced by a mask of sheer panic. David was still on the speakerphone, unaware of the audience standing frozen in my office. "The special agent in charge wanted me to relay thanks, Kiara." David continued, his voice crisp and professional. "The digital footprint Chloe left when she tried to bypass the biometric firewall made it an open and shut case for wire fraud. They also found the offshore routing numbers. The authorities are freezing the accounts of her husband as we speak." I pressed the button to mute the microphone. "Thank you, David," I said clearly into the receiver. "I will come down to the Security Operations Center in 10 minutes to sign the final incident report." I ended the call and let the heavy silence stretch across the room. My mother gripped the edge of my desk, her knuckles turning white. "What did he just say?" she whispered, her voice cracking with terror. "What dossier, Kiara? What did you do to your sister?" "I did my job, Mom," I replied, my voice steady and completely devoid of sympathy. 2 days ago, our automated security system flagged an unauthorized login attempt using my credentials. Someone tried to access a restricted client trust fund to wire $60,000 to a shell company registered under the name of Tyler. Did you really think my firm would not notice a massive fraudulent transfer? Tyler finally found his voice. He puffed out his chest desperately, trying to project authority, but his hands shook uncontrollably. "This is a massive misunderstanding," he stammered, pointing an accusing finger at me. "Chloe was just borrowing that money. She was going to put it right back. You did not have to go nuclear and involve federal agents. You can call them back, Kiara. Call them right now and tell them it was an authorized family transaction." "An authorized family transaction?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the cold glass desk. "Let us walk through exactly how authorized this was, Tyler. During Thanksgiving dinner last week, while I was in the kitchen, carving the turkey that I bought and cooked for all of you, my sister slipped into my home office. She bypassed my personal laptop lock and copied the encrypted login codes from my secure drive. She stole my identity, Tyler. She tried to steal the money of my clients to fund your pathetic lifestyle, and you stood right beside her while she did it. You are a coward and a thief." Tyler slammed his hand on the desk, his face turning a furious shade of crimson. His white knight complex was completely crumbling, and his underlying entitlement was bubbling rapidly to the surface. "It is your fault for having weak security protocols," he shouted, his logic entirely unhinged. "If you had just invested in my company like family is supposed to do, she would not have needed to find creative financing." "You forced her hand, Kiara. You are the exact reason she is sitting in a jail cell right now. My mother actually nodded along with his insane reasoning. Yes, she cried out, tears of frustration streaming down her face. You pushed her to this. You always were so stingy with your money. If you had just shared what you had, your sister would not have had to resort to taking it behind your back. I stared at them, absolutely disgusted by the mental gymnastics they were performing to make me the villain. You are both completely delusional, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. Stealing from a federally insured institution is not creative financing, it is a federal felony. And Mom, the fact that you are standing here blaming me because your golden child got caught committing cybercrimes is exactly why I am cutting you out of my life permanently. Tyler ran a hand through his hair, pacing the length of my office like a trapped animal. He realized that shouting was not working, so he tried to pivot back to manipulation. Okay, look, he said, holding up his hands in a placating gesture. Let us just calm down. We can fix this. You are the branch manager. You have the highest security clearance in this entire building. You can log into the mainframe and alter the access logs. You can make it look like a system glitch or a routine penetration test. If you erase the digital footprint, the FBI will not have the evidence they need to successfully prosecute her. We just need you to cover her tracks, Kiara. I looked at him in sheer disbelief. Are you seriously asking me to commit a federal crime, tamper with evidence, and risk going to federal prison myself just to cover up the crime your wife committed to benefit you? Tyler leaned in close, his blue eyes hard and desperate. She is your sister, he demanded. Family protects family. Plus, if she goes down, she is going to drag me into this. My startup will be ruined. My reputation will be completely destroyed. I cannot go to jail, Kiara. I am not built for it. I let a dark smile spread across my face. It was the first time I had smiled since they barged into my office. Your reputation. I chuckled softly. Your reputation is built on lies, Tyler. You are terrified because you know you are the mastermind. Chloe is not smart enough to set up an offshore shell company. You orchestrated this entire thing and you used her as the bait. And now that the trap has snapped shut, you are begging the black woman you just insulted to save your privileged skin. My mother lunged forward, grabbing my wrist, her nails dug deeply into my skin. Do it, Kiara, she pleaded, tears of pure terror spilling down her cheeks. Erase the computer logs. I forcefully yanked my arm back so hard that my mother stumbled into the heavy glass coffee table. I rubbed my wrist where her manicured nails had left angry red half-moons in my skin. Are you completely out of your mind, Mom? I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You are standing in the office of a federally regulated financial institution begging me to commit digital tampering to save a man who used your golden child as a human shield. You want me to risk 10 years in a federal penitentiary for him. Tyler stepped between us, puffing out his chest again. His sheer arrogance was staggering. He was cornered, but his ego refused to let him surrender. It was not a theft, Kiara, he insisted, adjusting his designer tie. It was an aggressive reallocation of bridge capital. My software company is on the verge of a massive breakthrough. We are disrupting the entire logistics industry. I just needed $60,000 to cover server costs and pay my offshore developers for one more month. If you had just invested in my vision like I asked you to at Thanksgiving, Chloe would never have had to authorize that transfer. When my company goes public next year, that 60 grand would have turned into 6 million. You are just too short-sighted to understand tech innovation. I let out a harsh laugh that echoed loudly in the tense room. Tech innovation. Tyler, I mocked, walking back around my desk to face him head-on. Let us talk about your groundbreaking innovation. Your company is called Apex Solutions. It is registered as a limited liability company in Delaware, but your primary place of business is a shared co-working desk in Midtown that you are 3 months behind on paying for. You do not have offshore developers. You have a freelance kid in Eastern Europe who you hired on a gig website to build a generic inventory tracking application that looks like it was coded in 2008. Tyler turned pale, but I was not even close to finished. You love to throw around words like disruption and Series A funding at family dinners to make my mother think you are the next Steve Jobs. I continued, my voice sharp and relentless. But you have zero active users. You have zero revenue. You do not even have a functional prototype. The only thing you have successfully disrupted is the credit score of my sister. Do not speak to him like that, my mother shrieked, recovering her balance and stepping forward to shield her precious son-in-law. Tyler is an entrepreneur. Building an empire takes time and sacrifice. You are just a corporate drone. You clock in and clock out while he is trying to build generational wealth for our family. Generational wealth, Mom, I fired back, pointing a finger directly at Tyler. Ask him how he paid for the tailored suit he is wearing right now. Ask him how he pays for his daily overpriced lunches and his networking drinks at the country club. My mother blinked, looking back at Tyler, who suddenly could not meet her eyes. Tyler, she asked softly. I will tell you how I said, refusing to let him off the hook. He pays for it all using a platinum credit card that Chloe opened in her name 6 months ago. She has maxed out 3 different cards just to fund his illusion of being a wealthy founder. I know this because my firm ran a comprehensive background check on him the moment his name popped up on that fraudulent wire transfer. His personal credit is completely ruined. He has 2 vehicles in repossession status. He could not get a loan for a bicycle, let alone a startup. He is entirely dependent on the salary of a 25-year-old girl, and when she maxed out her credit lines, he convinced her to steal from my clients. Tyler slammed both hands onto my desk, his face contorted in absolute fury. You do not know anything about me, he roared, completely losing his carefully crafted corporate demeanor. You sit up here in your ivory tower handing out advice, but you are nothing. You only have this job because this bank needed a black woman in management to look good on their corporate brochures. You are a token, Kiara. I am an actual creator. You are just a glorified secretary who watches the money of other people. The racial microaggression hung heavy in the air, but it did not break me. It only confirmed exactly who he was. I smiled coldly, looking him up and down with absolute pity. A glorified secretary, I repeated softly. That is funny, Tyler. Because this glorified secretary is the only reason the FBI knows exactly which offshore account you plan to use to hide the money. You thought you were so brilliant. You thought you could outsmart the system because you watched a few documentaries on financial fraud. But you used the same IP address to access the account of Chloe that you used to register your fake company website. Tyler froze, the anger draining from his face, replaced once again by the cold, creeping dread of reality. He realized that his supposed intellectual superiority had been completely dismantled. He was not a tech genius. He was a sloppy, desperate criminal who had left a digital trail a mile wide. You are a parasite. Tyler, I said, my voice steady and resolute. You found a family with a mother desperate enough for white validation to overlook your obvious flaws, and a sister insecure enough to fund your delusions. You bled them dry, and when there was nothing left, you tried to bleed me. But I do not play the role of the sacrificial lamb. I do not fund failures, and I certainly do not cover up federal crimes for mediocre men who insult me in my own office. My mother gasped loudly, stepping in front of Tyler as if my words were physical blows she needed to block. You have no right to speak to him that way, she yelled, her chest heaving with indignation. Tyler is a visionary. He is trying to build something from the ground up. You sit here in this air-conditioned glass box pushing papers for people who already have money, and you think that makes you better than him. You have no entrepreneurial spirit, Kiara. You have a worker bee mentality. You do not understand what it takes to sacrifice for a dream. I stood up slowly, planting my hands firmly on my desk. The sheer hypocrisy in her voice was suffocating. Sacrifice for a dream. I repeated, my voice dropping an octave, echoing off the cold walls of my office. You want to talk to me about sacrifice, Mom? Let us talk about your unique definition of the word. Because from where I am standing, your idea of sacrifice has always meant sacrificing me on the altar of the egos of other people. She crossed her arms, lifting her chin in that familiar, stubborn, and defiant way. You have always been ungrateful, she spat. I worked my fingers to the bone to provide a roof over your head. You had clothes. You had food. You were never neglected. Neglected. I laughed a harsh and bitter sound. No, you did not neglect me, Mom. You actively sabotaged me. Let us revisit the timeline of your grand investments, shall we? Let us talk about the Howard University Fund. My mother stiffened. Her eyes darted toward the door, suddenly terrified that someone outside my office might hear the ugly truth of our family history. You leave the past out of this, Kiara, she warned, her voice trembling slightly. This is about right now. This is about your sister sitting in a jail cell. No, I shot back, refusing to let her change the subject. This is exactly about the past. This is about a pattern of theft that you have enabled for 15 years. When Grandpa Theodore passed away, he left a trust account specifically for my college education. It was not family money. It was not your money. It was $18,000 earmarked exclusively for my tuition at Howard. I earned the grades. I got the acceptance letter. I did everything right. Tyler, who was still reeling from my earlier takedown, tried to scoff. 18 grand is nothing, he muttered defensively. That is seed money. It is pennies. It was everything to me, I snapped, turning my glare back to my mother. But you decided that my future was just seed money for the vanity of your golden child. Chloe barely graduated high school. She got accepted into a mediocre state college on academic probation. But because you could not stand the thought of your favorite daughter looking less than perfect in front of your friends, you forged my signature on the trust documents. You walked into a bank, lied to the teller, and drained every single cent of my tuition money. My mother raised her chin higher, refusing to break eye contact. She needed a reliable vehicle to commute, she argued, her voice shrill and desperate. You were going to a school in the city. You had public transportation. Chloe needed a car to get to campus safely. A reliable vehicle? I challenged, my voice rising in volume. Mom, you bought her a brand new luxury Audi. You bought an 18-year-old girl a German luxury sedan with my tuition money so she could flex on social media. You left me with exactly $0 2 weeks before my freshman semester started. Do you remember what you told me when I found out the account was empty? I paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her squirm. You told me that I was smart enough to figure it out. I continued, quoting her exact words from 15 years ago. You told me that Chloe needed a head start because she was not as academically gifted as I was. So I figured it out. I took out predatory student loans with massive interest rates. I worked a morning shift at the campus bookstore. I worked an evening shift at the dining hall. And on weekends I worked as a waitress at a diner off campus. I smelled like industrial bleach and old fry grease for 4 straight years. I slept 4 hours a night. I missed study groups. I missed networking events. I ruined my health and nearly collapsed from exhaustion just to pay for an education that was already supposed to be fully funded by my grandfather. You survived, my mother shouted back, tears of stubborn pride welling in her eyes. Look at you now. You have a great job. You proved me right. You were strong enough. You did not need the money as badly as she did. You see, Tyler, she said, turning to her son-in-law for validation. She has always been fiercely independent. She is just being difficult on purpose. That is a trauma response, Mom, I said coldly, shaking my head at her profound lack of self-awareness. I am independent because I learned at 18 that the woman who gave birth to me would gladly steal from my future to buy shiny toys for her favorite child. I learned that my blood relatives viewed my success as a threat and my bank accounts as a community chest. And now, 15 years later, absolutely nothing has changed. You are still demanding that I sacrifice my hard-earned money, the down payment for my first home, to bail out the same sister who just tried to steal from my clients. Only this time, she was not trying to buy an Audi. She was trying to fund the delusions of a man who cannot even afford the suit he is wearing right now. Tyler opened his mouth to interject, but I held up a hand, silencing him instantly. You are not an entrepreneur, Tyler, I said, looking at him with absolute disgust. And Mom, you are not a protective matriarch making tough choices. You are both just thieves masquerading as family. You stole my past, and now you are angry that I will not let you steal my future. The difference is that when you forged my signature for the Howard Fund, I was an 18-year-old kid who did not know how to fight back or navigate the legal system. Today, I am a corporate executive at a federal financial institution. I know exactly how to fight back, and I will never let a thief walk away with my money ever again. Tyler let out a harsh breath, shaking his head as if he were dealing with an unreasonable child. He paced the length of my office again, rubbing his jaw. "Look at you," he chuckled darkly, his voice dripping with condescension. "You are getting so emotional, Kiara. This is exactly why you are not equipped for the upper echelons of the corporate world. You let your personal feelings cloud your professional judgment. You are confusing a strategic pivot with malice. In the startup ecosystem, we call what Chloe did an aggressive equity reallocation. It happens all the time. It is a calculated risk. But you would not understand that. You are a middle manager." He continued, his tone turning oily and arrogant. "You follow algorithms. You check boxes on compliance forms. You do not actually create value. You are here to optimize optics. Let us be brutally honest for a second, Kiara. We both know why you are sitting in that chair. A high-end wealth management firm in downtown Atlanta needs a certain demographic aesthetic to appeal to the modern market. They need a black female branch manager to put on their promotional materials and prove they are committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. You are a corporate shield, Kiara. You are a quota. You are not a visionary." My mother gasped softly, but she did not defend me. She simply looked down at the floor, silently agreeing with his racist assessment of my hard-earned career. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach, but I did not raise my voice. I did not give him the satisfaction of seeing me angry. I leaned back in my leather chair, steepling my fingers together. I let the silence stretch, forcing Tyler to stand there in the quiet weight of his own profound ignorance. "An aggressive equity reallocation," I repeated slowly, tasting the sheer stupidity of the phrase. "Tyler, you are throwing around Silicon Valley buzzwords you heard on a podcast to justify federal wire fraud. Do you even know what an equity reallocation entails in a regulated market? It requires shareholder approval, a board resolution, and strict adherence to SEC guidelines. It does not involve your wife stealing login credentials during a Thanksgiving dinner to wire funds to an offshore shell company. That is not a strategic pivot. That is theft." Tyler scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "You are getting bogged down in the bureaucratic minutiae," he argued, his voice rising in frustration. "True innovators do not wait for permission. They move fast and break things. That is the ethos of disruption. I am trying to build a scalable infrastructure that will revolutionize supply chain logistics. I need agile capital." Chloe understood the vision. She recognized that the opportunity cost of waiting for you to write a check was too high. She took the initiative. And frankly, Kiara, you should be thanking her. When my company hits $1 billion valuation, you would have been part of the family network that helped launch it. But instead, you are weaponizing your little compliance rules to tear us down. You move fast and break things. I nodded, keeping my expression entirely neutral. "Well, Tyler, you definitely broke something. You broke federal law. And let us address your other point, the diversity quota." I stood up again, but this time I did not lean over the desk. I walked slowly around it, closing the distance between us until I was standing just a few feet away from him. Tyler was a tall man, but in that moment he looked incredibly small. "Do you want to know how I got this office?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, but sharp enough to cut glass. "I did not get this job because of my skin color or my gender. I got this job because I spent 10 years outperforming every single privileged, mediocre man who thought they deserved my promotion simply because they were born with a silver spoon in their mouth. I manage a portfolio of over $800 million. I passed the Series 7, the Series 66, and the Series 24 exams on my first try. I possess a Master of Business Administration from a top-tier university that I paid for myself. I am the Director of Risk Management because I have a flawless track record of identifying fraudulent behavior and neutralizing threats to this firm. I took another step closer, forcing Tyler to look me directly in the eye. You think you are superior to me because society told you that a white man with a startup idea is a genius, while a black woman with a corporate career is just a diversity hire. But out here in the real world, your privilege cannot protect you from the consequences of your own incompetence. You could not secure legitimate funding because your business model is a joke. Your code is garbage. Your user interface is non-existent. Legitimate investors saw right through you. The only person gullible enough to buy your charade was my desperate sister, and the only way you could fund your fantasy was to steal from me. Tyler clenched his fists at his sides. His face was a map of barely contained fury and deep humiliation. You are nothing but an arrogant bureaucrat. He hissed, his voice trembling with a toxic mix of rage and absolute fear. You do not understand how the real world operates at all. You are going to regret this deeply, Kiara. You are going to wish you had given us the money. I smiled a cold and unyielding smile. The tension in the room thickened. You are projecting, Tyler, I replied softly. I do not regret protecting my own livelihood. I do not regret defending my hard-earned savings. The only person who is going to regret their actions today is the man who thought he could use corporate buzzwords and racial insults to intimidate a federal financial officer. Tyler opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a deflated balloon, his arrogant posture crumbling under the weight of his own profound humiliation. My mother, seeing her champion utterly dismantled, realized she had to take matters into her own hands. She stepped right in front of him, physically shielding him once again, and glared at me with a look of pure, unadulterated venom. She stood there as a woman who was willing to burn my entire world to the ground to keep her golden child warm. Listen to me very carefully, Kiara, my mother said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. You think you hold all the cards because you sit in this fancy chair and wear designer clothes. You think you are untouchable because you have a fancy title on your door. But you are forgetting one very important detail. I am your mother. I know how this world works. And I know exactly how precarious your little corporate throne actually is. If you do not authorize that transfer right now, she continued, I am going to walk out of this office and go straight to the executive floor. I am going to find the senior managing partner of this firm. And I am going to sit down in his office, cry real tears, and tell him that my daughter has a severe gambling addiction. I will tell him that you have been secretly siphoning money from the accounts of your elderly clients to cover your massive personal debts. I stared at her, feeling a literal chill run down my spine. The sheer malice in her eyes was breathtaking. You would lie to my employers and accuse me of a federal crime, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You would purposely destroy my career, the career I spent a decade building from absolutely nothing, just to protect a man who stole from me. I will do whatever it takes to protect my family, she spat back, her face twisted in an ugly sneer. And let us be honest, Kiara. Who do you think they are going to believe? A distressed mother coming forward out of the goodness of her heart to protect innocent clients, or a young black woman who suddenly has access to millions of dollars? Do you really think these wealthy white men in charge of this firm trust you unconditionally? The moment I plant that seed of doubt, they will suspend you. They will freeze your accounts. They will launch a massive internal investigation. Even if they do not find anything, the scandal will ruin your reputation in this industry forever. You will be blacklisted. You will lose this job. You will lose your savings, paying for expensive defense lawyers, and you will never work in finance again. The silence that followed her threat was heavy and suffocating. I looked through the glass walls of my office, out into the bullpen where my team of financial advisors was quietly working. I thought about the hundreds of hours I had spent studying for my licensing exams. I thought about the missed holidays, the late nights, the sheer exhaustion of having to be twice as good just to get half the recognition. My mother knew exactly what my career cost me. She knew the unique pressures I faced navigating corporate America as a woman of color. and she was eagerly weaponizing that exact vulnerability against me without a single ounce of hesitation. Tyler straightened his tie and offered a sickeningly sweet smile. "She is right, Kiara," he chimed in, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Corporate optics are everything. Once there is a whisper of financial impropriety, the compliance department will have no choice but to place you on administrative leave. Is $60,000 really worth throwing away your entire future? Just sign the authorization paper. You help us out today, and your mother walks out of here quietly. We all go back to our normal lives. No one has to get hurt." I looked back and forth between the two of them. They were a perfect match. Two moral bankrupts feeding off each other, convinced that their extortion plot was foolproof. They genuinely believed they had cornered me. They thought the threat of losing my status and my income would break my spirit and force me into submission. It was the ultimate betrayal. The woman who gave birth to me was looking me dead in the eye, holding a knife to the throat of my livelihood and demanding a ransom. "You are right about one thing, Mom," I said, slowly keeping my hands folded neatly on my desk. "Corporate optics are extremely important in this industry. Reputation is the only currency that truly matters when you are managing the wealth of other people. But you made one massive miscalculation in your little blackmail scheme. You assumed that my employers are just as gullible and easily manipulated as you are. You assumed that a firm handling billions of dollars in assets would just take the word of an angry, hysterical woman who stormed past the reception desk without an appointment." My mother scoffed, crossing her arms defensively. "They will investigate," she insisted stubbornly. "And the investigation alone will be enough to taint your precious name. You will be a liability to them." "That is where you are wrong," I replied, my voice steady and unyielding. "Financial institutions of this caliber do not operate on gossip, Mom. They operate on data. They operate on complex digital audits, heavily encrypted transaction logs, and absolute mathematical certainty. If you walk upstairs right now and accuse me of embezzlement, they will not just suspend me based on your tears. They will immediately initiate a forensic audit of every single account I manage. They will bring in external federal auditors to trace every penny that has moved through my branch over the last 5 years. You would go straight to federal prison with them." My mother froze, the color draining completely from her face. The word prison hung in the air between us like a physical weight. Tyler opened his mouth to argue, probably to offer another ridiculous piece of corporate jargon, but before he could make a single sound, the red light on my desk phone began to flash. This was not the standard internal intercom. It was line 2. The encrypted line reserved for severe security breaches and executive communications. I looked down at the caller identification display. It was the cybersecurity division again, but this time the screen showed a conference call, Bridge. The names listed included David from Digital Security, Marcus, the Chief Compliance Officer of the entire firm, and a restricted external number. I kept my hand hovering over the receiver. I looked directly into the terrified eyes of my mother. "You wanted to involve my bosses?" I asked softly, my voice cutting through the heavy silence of the room. "You wanted to march upstairs and tell them a fabricated story about my professional conduct. Well, Mom, you do not have to take the elevator. They are calling me right now. Let us see how well your fake tears and manipulative threats work on the Federal Compliance Division." My mother shook her head frantically, her eyes wide with sheer panic. She reached out a trembling hand, as if she could physically stop me from answering, but she was too late. I pressed the speaker button, turning the volume to maximum. "Kiara," the stern voice of Marcus filled the office, immediately echoing off the glass walls. "Are you in a secure location?" "Yes, Marcus," I replied smoothly, not taking my eyes off Tyler, who had suddenly turned the color of chalk. "I am in my office, with the door closed." "Good." Marcus continued, his tone devoid of any corporate pleasantries. The atmosphere in the room shifted violently. Just seconds ago, Tyler and my mother were aggressively trying to blackmail me, convinced they held all the power. Now the very real presence of external authorities pierced their bubble of delusion, replacing their arrogance with suffocating dread. Tyler stumbled backward, his expensive leather shoes squeaking against the hardwood floor until his back hit the glass wall. He looked like a cornered animal, realizing the trap had just snapped shut. "We have an urgent update regarding the unauthorized access incident from your account," Marcus said. "David from Cybersecurity is on the line, along with Special Agent Reynolds from the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI. My mother clamped both hands over her mouth to stifle a gasp. Her knees buckled slightly, and she had to lean heavily against my desk just to stay upright. The reality of the situation was finally crashing down on her. This was no longer a family squabble that she could win by screaming the loudest. This was a federal investigation. "Good morning, Ms. Chiara," a deep, authoritative voice boomed from the speakerphone. "This is Agent Reynolds. I want to thank you for your swift action in forwarding the digital logs to our field office. Your risk management protocols functioned exactly as designed. We have your sister Chloe in custody at the Fulton County Detention Center, and she is currently awaiting federal arraignment." Tyler let out a pathetic whimpering sound. He darted his eyes toward the door, clearly running through a panicked calculation of whether he could make a run for the elevators. I stared him down silently, daring him to try and escape a building swarming with trained corporate security guards. He swallowed hard and remained frozen against the glass. However, Agent Reynolds continued, his voice crisp and methodical. "We are currently analyzing the secondary authorization protocols the suspect attempted to use. The digital footprint shows the money was destined for an offshore routing number connected to a Delaware holding company named Apex Solutions." Tyler closed his eyes, his chest heaving as he realized the FBI already knew the name of his fraudulent tech startup. He was not just an accessory. He was the primary beneficiary of the wire fraud. "The issue we are looking at now," the agent explained, "is the manual override. In order to bypass the biometric security for a transfer of $60,000, the perpetrator uploaded a scanned copy of a physical authorization form. The signature on the document was forged, obviously. But what elevates this from a simple identity theft case to a multi-person criminal conspiracy is the notary stamp." My mother stopped breathing. The silence in the office was so absolute that I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning unit above us. A certified public notary stamp was applied to the forged document, validating the fake signature. Agent Reynolds stated clearly. "This means your sister did not act alone. Someone with an active state license intentionally stamped a fraudulent financial document to help steal funds from a federally insured institution. That individual is looking at a minimum of 5 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit bank fraud." David from Cybersecurity chimed in. "Chiara, we are currently pulling the registration numbers off the scanned stamp. It is slightly blurred in the upload, but our forensics team is enhancing the image right now. We should have the name of the rogue notary within the hour. Once we have that identity, the FBI will issue a second arrest warrant immediately." "Understood, David," I replied, my voice steady and perfectly calm. "Please keep me updated the moment you identify the notary. I am sure the authorities will want to bring them in for questioning right away. I will be down in the security center shortly to sign any additional affidavits the agent requires." "Thank you," Chiara, Marcus said. "We will see you downstairs." I reached out and pressed the button to end the call. The red light on the console stopped flashing, plunging the room back into a heavy and suffocating silence. I slowly folded my hands together and rested them on the cool glass surface of my desk. The silence in the office was so absolute that I could hear the erratic, ragged breathing of my mother. She was staring at the dark screen of the telephone as if it were a venomous snake preparing to strike. Tyler had completely stopped moving. He was pressed so hard against the glass wall of my office that I thought it might shatter under his weight. Neither of them dared to speak. The reality of what they had just heard was finally penetrating their thick layers of arrogance and entitlement. They had walked into my office expecting to bully me into handing over my life savings to cover up a minor mistake. They had believed Tyler when he told them Chloe was just being held on a simple misunderstanding. But now the truth was out in the open, and it was ugly and terrifying. "Well, Mom," I said, my voice breaking the silence like a gunshot. It looks like you will not need to go up to the executive floor to make up a story about me. The federal authorities are already highly involved with our family. My mother finally tore her eyes away from the phone and looked at me. Her face was completely devoid of color and her hands were shaking violently. Kiara, she whispered, her voice barely audible. What did that man mean about a notary stamp? You know exactly what he meant, Mom, I replied, keeping my tone perfectly even and devoid of any sympathy. You told me earlier that you would do whatever it takes to protect your family. It seems you took that commitment quite literally. You used your official state-issued notary seal to authenticate a forged authorization form. You helped Chloe bypass the secondary security protocols of a federal financial institution. I leaned back in my chair, observing the sheer terror washing over her features. Tell me, Mom, did you actually read the document you were stamping, or did Tyler just hand you a piece of paper and tell you it was for his brilliant tech startup? My mother swallowed hard, her eyes darting frantically toward Tyler. He told me it was a character reference, she stammered, her voice rising in pitch as the panic took hold. He told me he needed a notarized character reference for a new venture capital investor. I did not read the fine print, Kiara. I swear to you, I did not read it. I just stamped it where he told me to sign. I let out a harsh, humorless laugh. A character reference, I repeated, shaking my head at her profound gullibility. You are a licensed notary public, Mom. Your entire job is to verify the identity of the signatory and understand the nature of the document you are stamping. Ignorance is not a valid legal defense when you are dealing with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You stamped a document authorizing the fraudulent transfer of $60,000 from a restricted client trust fund to an offshore shell company. You are an accessory to federal wire fraud. The word federal hung in the air, heavy and absolute. My mother staggered backward and collapsed into one of the leather guest chairs facing my desk. She buried her face in her hands and began to sob uncontrollably. The sound of her crying was loud and desperate, but it did not move me. For 33 years, I had watched her use those tears to manipulate every situation to her advantage. I had watched her cry to get out of parking tickets, to guilt me into doing chores for Chloe, and to play the victim whenever anyone held her accountable for her toxic behavior. But tears do not work on federal agents, and they certainly no longer worked on me. Tyler finally pushed himself away from the glass wall. His expensive suit was wrinkled and dark patches of sweat had formed under his arms. The confident tech bro persona was completely gone, replaced by the panicked scrambling of a cornered coward. This is insane, he muttered, wiping his forehead with the back of his trembling hand. Chloe must have mixed up the paperwork. She is not a criminal, Kiara. She just made a clerical error. You have to call that agent back. You have to tell them it was a marital misunderstanding. A clerical error, I asked, standing up from my chair and walking around the desk to face him directly. Tyler, the FBI does not execute pre-dawn arrest warrants for clerical errors. Let me explain exactly what your wife did, because clearly you are still trying to play dumb. Chloe did not just accidentally type in the wrong account number. She executed a targeted cyber theft. She used keylogging software that she secretly installed on my personal laptop during Thanksgiving dinner to steal my secure encrypted passwords. She then logged into the internal portal of my firm from your shared apartment network, navigated past 3 different security firewalls, and attempted to wire funds to an account registered in Delaware under your name. That requires premeditation, Tyler. It requires malicious intent. I took a step closer, forcing him to look me in the eye. And here's the absolute best part, Tyler. The system flagged the transaction immediately because she tried to route the money to a newly established limited liability company with zero financial history. My firm deals with accounts holding hundreds of millions of dollars. We employ the most advanced artificial intelligence fraud detection software on the planet. Chloe triggered every single alarm in the system the moment she hit submit. She did not even make it past the pending status before the account was frozen and the authorities were notified. You sent your wife to do the job of a master hacker, and she left a digital trail so obvious a child could follow it. Tyler backed away, his eyes wide with disbelief. He shook his head, refusing to accept the reality of his own catastrophic failure. No, he breathed heavily. We used a virtual private network. We bounced the signal. They cannot trace that back to my company. You are lying, Kiara. You are just trying to scare us. I am not a detective, Tyler, I replied coldly. I am a risk manager. But I do know that your offshore web hosting provider handed over your IP logs the moment they received a federal subpoena. You are not starring in a cyber thriller movie, Tyler. You are a mediocre scam artist who just dragged his wife and his mother-in-law into a federal indictment because you were too lazy to get a real job. The FBI is not looking at this as a family dispute over borrowed money. They are treating this as an orchestrated attack on a financial institution. And in federal court, the mastermind always gets the heaviest sentence. Tyler stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, but no words came out. The heavy sentence reality had finally paralyzed him. My mother was still weeping quietly in the leather chair, her hands trembling as she wiped her mascara-stained face. I did not offer her a tissue. I walked slowly around my desk and leaned against the edge, crossing my arms over my chest. Let us take a walk down memory lane, I said, my voice dropping to a calm, reflective tone that was somehow more terrifying than if I had been screaming. Let us go back to last Thursday, Thanksgiving. I want to break down exactly how this betrayal unfolded, because I need both of you to understand the sheer depth of your own depravity. I hosted Thanksgiving this year at my house, the house I rent because I have been diligently saving my money to buy my own property. I spent 2 whole days preparing for that dinner. I spent $400 on groceries. I brined the turkey for 12 hours. I baked the pies from scratch. I cleaned every inch of my home so that my family would feel welcome and comfortable. And how did you all repay my hospitality? You showed up 2 hours late. You did not bring a single side dish or even a bottle of wine. Tyler, you immediately walked into my kitchen, opened my refrigerator, and uncorked a bottle of Reserve Cabernet that I had been saving for a special occasion. You poured yourself a massive glass and proceeded to lecture me about how the stock market was dead and crypto was the future. My mother spent the first hour complaining that the house was too cold and that the neighborhood was not upscale enough for her tastes. But the real performance started right before I served dinner. Chloe suddenly announced that she had a terrible migraine. She rubbed her temples, put on a perfectly practiced grimace, and told everyone she just needed to lie down in the guest bedroom for 20 minutes until the medication kicked in. My mother, of course, rushed to her side, fussing over her and demanding that we keep the noise down so her precious golden child could rest. Except Chloe did not go to the guest bedroom. She went straight down the hall to my home office. Tyler shifted his weight uncomfortably, his eyes darting toward the floor. He knew exactly what was coming. I continued, my voice steady and sharp. My home office is my sanctuary. It is where I handle sensitive client data when I am working remotely. I always keep the door locked when I have guests. But because it was just family, because I foolishly trusted my own flesh and blood, I left it unlocked. I was in the kitchen carving the turkey and arranging the serving platters, while my sister was in my private space, violating my entire life. My work laptop was sitting on my desk, closed and secured. But Chloe did not need to open it. She did not need to guess my password. Because, Tyler, you gave her a physical hardware keylogger. You bought a small USB device, probably off the internet, using my sister credit card, and you instructed her exactly how to plug it into the back port of my computer. My mother stopped crying and looked up, her eyes wide with confusion. A keylogger, she whispered the technical term, clearly going over her head. What is that? It is a device used by criminals to record every single keystroke typed on a keyboard, I explained, keeping my gaze fixed on Tyler. Chloe plugged it in on Thanksgiving. For the next 3 days while I was working from home, that little piece of hardware recorded my employee identification number, my alphanumeric security passwords, and my 2-factor authentication backup codes. It captured everything. And then on Sunday afternoon, when you all conveniently stopped by my house again for leftovers, Chloe slipped back into the office and retrieved the device. She came back into the kitchen, smiled at me, kissed my cheek, and thanked me for the turkey sandwiches. You ate my food. You drank my wine. You sat at my dining room table and smiled at me, asking about my career and pretending to care about my life, all while you had the digital keys to my destruction sitting in your designer purse. The sheer sociopathic audacity of that behavior is something I am still struggling to fully comprehend. You did not just rob a bank, you robbed your sister. You weaponized my hospitality and used my own home as the staging ground to commit a federal felony. Tyler swallowed hard, the Adam apple in his throat bobbing nervously. He tried to speak, his voice coming out as a weak rasp. We were desperate, Kiara. You have to understand the pressure I was under. The server costs were compounding. The developers were threatening to walk away. I was going to lose everything I built. You built nothing! I snapped, my voice finally cracking like a whip. You built a house of cards on a foundation of lies. And when the wind blew, you decided to use my career as a human shield. You thought I would be the perfect victim. You figured that because I am a black woman in corporate America, the firm would automatically assume I was guilty of embezzlement the moment the funds went missing. You calculated that the investigation would destroy me long before they ever traced the money back to your fake shell company. That is why you needed my mother to stamp that forged authorization form. You needed an inside man to validate the manual override. You convinced her that she was just helping out the family, but in reality, you were setting her up to take the fall if the digital trace failed. You made her the guarantor of a fraudulent wire transfer. If the FBI had not traced the IP address back to you, Tyler, they would have looked at that notarized document and arrested my mother immediately. My mother gasped, a sharp intake of air that sounded like she was suffocating. She looked at Tyler, the realization finally dawning on her. The white knight she had worshipped, the man she had constantly compared me to, had actively put her in the crosshairs of a federal indictment just to save himself. You used me, she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of horror and heartbreak. You told me it was a character reference for a venture capitalist. You lied to me. He did not just lie to you, Mom, I said quietly, the anger in my chest hardening into solid ice. He handed you a loaded gun, pointed it at your own head, and told you to pull the trigger. And you did it. You did it because you were so desperate to believe that Chloe married a genius that you completely abandoned all common sense. You betrayed me to protect a man who would gladly watch you burn. Tyler stared at me for a long moment, his face pale and slick with sweat. Then, incredibly, a short, bitter laugh escaped his lips. He shook his head and pushed himself away from the glass wall, smoothing the front of his jacket as if brushing off my words. You are so dramatic, Kiara, he scoffed, his voice dripping with sudden renewed arrogance. A loaded gun. Watching people burn. You watch too many soap operas. Let us deal with the facts here, not your emotional exaggerations. You want to talk about responsibility? Let us talk about your complete lack of professional security. You claim to be this high-level risk management executive, but you left your corporate laptop completely vulnerable in a house full of guests. If your data was so incredibly sensitive, you should have had better protocols in place. You practically invited this to happen. I stared at him, honestly mesmerized by the sheer magnitude of his narcissism. He was standing in my office, moments away from a federal indictment, and his defense strategy was to blame me for not locking my door tightly enough against my own family. You are blaming me for being robbed, I asked, keeping my voice dangerously low. I am pointing out your contributory negligence, Tyler shot back, stepping forward and pointing a finger at me. You left the vault open, Kiara. Chloe did not want to take that money. She was crying when she plugged that device in. She felt terrible about it, but she had no other choice because her own sister turned her back on her. We came to you at Thanksgiving and presented you with a ground floor opportunity to invest in Apex Solutions. We offered you a chance to be part of something revolutionary. And what did you do? You laughed at me. You told me my business model was flawed. You kept your precious savings locked away while my company was literally days away from going under. You forced her hand. Tyler continued, his voice rising with righteous indignation. I had payroll to meet. I had server hosting fees that were compounding daily. If I defaulted, my entire infrastructure would have been wiped out. 3 years of my hard work would have vanished just because you were too selfish to write a check. Chloe saw her husband drowning, and she took the initiative to save our family. She did not steal anything. She initiated a short-term bridge loan. I had every intention of paying that money back the moment our Series A funding cleared next quarter. It was an internal family transfer that you decided to criminalize out of pure spite. You were jealous that Chloe believed in my vision when you did not. My mother wiped her eyes and looked up, her expression shifting. The manipulation was working on her again. Tyler was giving her exactly what she wanted, a narrative where Chloe was the tragic heroine acting out of love rather than a greedy criminal. "He is right, Kiara," my mother murmured, her voice shaky but gaining strength. "You have always been so rigid with your money. You could have just helped them. If you had just given them the loan, none of this would be happening. Chloe just wanted to support her husband. She made a bad choice, but her heart was in the right place. You did not have to call the federal authorities on your own blood." I slammed my hand down on the glass desk. The loud crack echoed like a gunshot, instantly silencing both of them. My mother flinched backward, and Tyler stopped his pacing, dead in his tracks. "Do not you dare!" I warned, my voice shaking with pure, focused rage. "Do not you dare try to spin federal wire fraud into a story of marital devotion. A short-term bridge loan, Tyler. Let me educate you on how financial institutions operate, since your imaginary startup clearly has no accounting department. When you bypass biometric firewalls, forge corporate signatures, and route client funds to an offshore account to evade taxes and hide assets, that is not borrowing. That is money laundering. That is grand larceny. And no venture capital firm on the planet was ever going to give you Series A funding, because you do not have a product. You have a massive ego and a mountain of credit card debt." I walked around the desk, stopping mere inches from Tyler, forcing him to look down at me. "You are a complete fraud," I said, my words striking him like physical blows. "You preyed on the insecurities of my sister. You knew Chloe was desperate for a wealthy, successful husband to show off to our mother, so you played the part. You bought expensive suits you could not afford. You leased luxury cars you could not maintain, and you expected her to foot the bill. When her credit ran dry, you manipulated her into committing a felony. You told her to steal from my clients because you are too incompetent to earn a legitimate paycheck. And now that you are caught, your instinct is to blame the locks on my door. It takes a special kind of coward to hide behind his wife and his mother-in-law while playing the victim." Tyler clenched his jaw, his face turning purple with suppressed rage. "You think you are so smart?" he hissed, his breath hot and ragged. "You think you have this all figured out, but you do not know anything about business. You are just a glorified accountant." I smiled coldly into his face. "Maybe I am just an accountant," I replied quietly. "But this accountant just balanced the books, and your account is completely overdrawn forever. You are going to prison, Tyler, and no amount of corporate jargon is going to save you from federal charges. The only thing you successfully disrupted today was your own life and the lives of the women foolish enough to trust you." Tyler stared at me for a long moment, his face pale and slick with sweat. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire reality crumble into dust and was frantically trying to piece it back together with cheap tape. He took a deep breath, swallowing his pride, and abruptly changed his entire demeanor. The aggressive posturing vanished. The arrogant tech founder facade melted away. In its place stood a desperate, cornered criminal who realized that his only way out was through me. "Fine," Tyler whispered, his voice dropping to a frantic, hushed tone. He stepped closer to my desk, leaning over the glass surface and lowering his head, as if we were suddenly co-conspirators. "You want to be right, Kiara. Congratulations, you are completely right. You figured it all out. Are you happy now? You proved that you are the smartest person in the room. But being right does not change the fact that your sister is currently sitting in a concrete cell wearing an orange jumpsuit. Being right does not keep her out of federal lockup." He placed both hands flat on my desk, staring at me with wild, pleading eyes. "But you can," he said, his voice trembling with a terrifying kind of manic hope. "You have the power to fix all of this right now. You are the branch manager, Kiara. You have the highest administrative privileges in this entire building. I know how these legacy banking systems work. I have studied network architecture. There is always a back door. There is always a way for executives to purge temporary files before they are permanently written to the main federal ledger. I looked at him in absolute stunned silence. My mind struggled to process the sheer magnitude of what he was implying. Are you actually suggesting what I think you are suggesting? I asked, keeping my voice perfectly flat so he would keep digging his own grave. I am not suggesting anything, Tyler rushed to say, his words tumbling out in a desperate flood. I am telling you what we have to do. You are going to authorize the release of that $60,000 to the bail bondsman right now. We get Chloe out of that jail cell before she breaks down and says something stupid to the federal agents. Then you are going to sit down at that terminal log into your corporate mainframe and scrub the transaction logs. My mother, who had been weeping silently in the corner, suddenly sat up straight. She wiped her eyes, smearing dark mascara across her cheeks, and looked at me with renewed desperation. Yes, she breathed, her voice trembling with fragile hope. You can do that, Kiara. You control the computers. You can just make the whole thing disappear like it never happened. Tyler nodded vigorously, pointing a finger at my computer monitor. Exactly, he urged, his eyes wide and frantic. You go into the system architecture and you delete the IP access logs. You wipe the biometric override history. You delete the scanned copy of the notarized document your mother stamped. You frame it as a system glitch. Tell your bosses there was a server malfunction during a routine security patch. They trust you, Kiara. You just told me yourself that you have a flawless track record. They will believe you. If the digital evidence is gone, the FBI has no case. They will have to drop the charges. I sat perfectly still, listening to this man outline a comprehensive plan to commit multiple federal crimes right inside my own office. He wanted me to become an active participant in his cyber fraud. He wanted me to risk my entire career, my freedom, and my future to cover up a crime he orchestrated. And if I do not, I asked, softly testing the boundaries of his delusion. If you do not, then you are actively choosing to destroy our family. Tyler fired back, his voice dripping with venomous manipulation. He was using the ultimate guilt trip, wrapping his criminal demands in the sacred cloth of family loyalty. If you let her go to federal prison, her life is over, Kiara. My life is over. Your mother will be indicted. We will lose everything, and it will be entirely your fault because you had the power to stop it, and you chose to do nothing. You owe her this, Kiara. She is your blood. You have to save her. My mother stood up from her chair and walked slowly toward my desk. She reached out and placed her cold, trembling hand over mine. Kiara, please, she begged, her voice cracking with raw emotion. I am begging you as your mother. I brought you into this world. I raised you. I know we have our differences, and I know I have made mistakes with the college fund, but this is your sister. This is family. We protect our own. You cannot let them take her away. You cannot let them take me away. Just log into the computer and erase the files. We will pay you back the $60,000, I swear it. Tyler will get his funding, and we will pay you back every single penny. Just do this one thing for us, and I will never ask you for anything ever again. They stood there, united in their absolute moral bankruptcy. They were looking at me not as a daughter or a sister, but as a human shield. They genuinely believed that my sense of familial obligation would override my sense of self-preservation. They thought they could guilt me into committing a felony. They were demanding that I set myself on fire to keep them warm, and they expected me to do it with a smile on my face. I looked down at my mother's hand resting on top of mine. I looked at the desperate, sweat-beaded face of Tyler. I felt a cold, calculated calm wash over me. The trap was fully set. They had just confessed to everything and outlined a conspiracy to commit evidence tampering, all while sitting in my office. I did not pull my hand away from my mother. I did not yell. I simply looked up at Tyler and let out a slow, measured breath. You want me to wipe the mainframe? I asked, my voice quiet and seemingly hesitant. You want me to delete the notarized document and clear the access logs so the FBI has nothing to trace? Yes. Tyler breathed, his eyes lighting up with the thrill of victory. Yes, exactly. Just wipe the servers, Kiara. We can walk out of here and never speak of this again. It is the only way to save all of us. Just do it. I let my shoulders slump forward perfectly, faking a posture of total defeat. I looked away from Tyler and stared down at the blank surface of my desk, letting out a long, heavy sigh. Okay, I whispered, my voice deliberately stripped of all its previous anger. Okay, you are right. She is my sister. I cannot let her go to federal prison. I will do it. Tyler let out a massive breath of air that sounded like a punctured tire. He immediately stood up straighter, his shoulders relaxing as the arrogant smirk slowly crept back onto his face. I knew you would see reason, Kiara, he said, running a hand through his hair. You are making the smart choice. We are family. This is what family does. My mother let out a loud sob of relief and reached across the desk to squeeze my hand again. Thank you, she cried, her tears falling onto the glass. Thank you, Kiara. I knew you had a good heart. I knew you would not abandon us. I gently pulled my hand away from her grasp and opened the top drawer of my desk. I pulled out a legal pad and a gold pen, placing them carefully in front of me. If I am going to do this, I need to know absolutely everything I said, looking back and forth between the two of them. I cannot just press a magic delete button. The security architecture of this firm is incredibly complex. The digital forensics team will look for anomalies. If I am going to scrub the server, I need to retrace your exact steps. I need to know every single thing you did so I can erase every single digital fingerprint. If you leave out even one detail, the federal auditors will find it and we will all go to jail. Do you understand? Tyler nodded eagerly, pulling up one of the heavy leather guest chairs and sitting down right in front of my desk. He leaned in, resting his elbows on his knees, looking like a project manager ready to give a presentation. I understand completely, he said. Ask me whatever you need. I will give you the exact technical roadmap. I clicked my pen and looked at him. Let us start with the physical authorization document, I said, keeping my tone strictly professional. A transfer of $60,000 requires a dual authentication process. Even with my stolen passwords, the system would prompt for a physical signature upload for any amount over $50,000. Where did you get my signature, Tyler? Tyler smiled, clearly proud of his own criminal ingenuity. I forged it, he admitted, without a single ounce of shame. I found an old birthday card you sent to Chloe last year. You signed your full name at the bottom. I scanned the card into my computer, used a photo editing software to isolate your signature, and superimposed it onto a blank wire transfer authorization form I downloaded from the public website of your bank. It was a perfect match. I printed it out so it looked like an original physical document. I wrote the words, "Forged document, superimposed signature" on my legal pad. I made sure to press the pen down hard so the microphone under my desk would pick up the scratching sound. And the account destination, I asked. The system flags new accounts automatically. How did you set up Apex Solutions to receive a corporate trust wire without triggering the 30-day holding period? I used a third-party payment processor registered in the Cayman Islands, Tyler explained, leaning closer as if sharing a brilliant trade secret. I routed the receiving account through a decentralized crypto exchange before bouncing it back to the domestic Delaware company. I figured the algorithmic security would see the Cayman processor as a standard international vendor payment instead of a direct wire to a new business. I nodded slowly, writing down Cayman Islands processor and decentralized crypto exchange. He was actively confessing to international money laundering. The federal agents listening on the open security line were probably taking their own detailed notes. I turned my attention to my mother. She was sitting quietly, wiping her face with a tissue, looking incredibly relieved that Tyler was handling the technical questions. "Mom," I said softly, drawing her eyes to me. Tyler printed the forged document, but the system requires a certified public notary stamp to validate the manual override. You used your official state stamp on the paper. Yes, she answered quickly, eager to prove how helpful she had been. I stamped it right in our kitchen, but a stamp is not enough. I pressed, maintaining my facade of deep concern. The bank requires the notary to log the transaction in their official state ledger. If I delete the digital file from the bank server, the FBI will still look at your physical notary journal. Did you write the transaction down in your official book? My mother smiled proudly, dabbing at her eyes. Of course I did, Kiara. I am not stupid. I knew we had to make it look legitimate in case anyone ever checked my records. I logged the date, the time, and the type of document. I even wrote down a fake driver license number for the identification section. I made it look like you were sitting right there in my kitchen handing me your identification. I wrote down falsified state ledger and fake identification numbers on my pad. My mother had just confessed to tampering with official government records. Okay, I said, tapping my pen against the paper. So we have the forged signature, the offshore routing, and the falsified notary log. There is only one piece left: the actual execution of the transfer. Chloe was logged in under my credentials, but the system records the exact biometric rhythm of the user typing, who physically hit the submit button on the computer. Tyler waved his hand dismissively. Chloe was a complete mess, he said, rolling his eyes. She was crying and shaking the whole time. She typed in your passwords, but when the final confirmation screen came up, she completely froze. She said she could not do it to her own sister, so she did not initiate the wire, I asked, narrowing my eyes. No, Tyler scoffed. She was having a full panic attack. I had to push her out of the chair. I took the mouse and I clicked the submit button myself. I initiated the transfer. Someone had to be the adult in the room and get the job done. I stopped writing. I set my gold pen down on the desk. The trap had perfectly snapped shut. In less than 5 minutes, I had successfully manipulated Tyler into confessing that he was the primary actor who executed the wire fraud. I had manipulated my mother into confessing that she falsified a government ledger. They had given me every single piece of evidence the prosecution would ever need to secure a maximum sentence. They thought they were giving me the blueprint to save them, but they had just handed me the nails for their own coffins. I looked up from my legal pad and offered them a tight, strained smile. I needed to keep them talking. I needed the recording to be so airtight that no defense attorney could ever claim they were coerced or confused. So, Mom, I said, leaning forward and focusing entirely on her, I understand that you falsified the ledger, but what about the physical stamp? The bank audits notary seals against a state database. They check the expiration dates and the unique commission numbers. If they pull the physical document, how did you make sure it passed the initial visual inspection without triggering an immediate fraud alert? My mother sat up a little taller, practically beaming with misplaced pride. She completely misread my investigative questioning as professional admiration. Oh, I thought of that, she said, waving her hand dismissively. I have been a notary public for over a decade, Kiara. I know exactly what the underwriters look for when they process wire authorizations. I did not just stamp the paper blindly. I used my brand new self-inking state seal. I made sure the impression was perfectly clear, not smudged or faded. I even signed my name using the exact cursive loop I registered with the Secretary of State. It was flawless. Tyler nodded enthusiastically, patting my mother on the shoulder. Brenda was a total professional. He bragged, completely blind to the fact that he was praising her for committing a major felony. She guided Chloe through the entire documentation process. When Chloe was freaking out about the signature verification, your mother was the one who calmed her down. She told Chloe that as long as the notary seal was legitimate, the bank clerks would never question the signature itself. She engineered the entire physical bypass. I wrote engineered physical bypass on my legal pad. My mother was actually smiling now. She felt important. She felt like she was an integral part of a sophisticated operation rather than a pawn in a sloppy heist. You see, Kiara, my mother continued, leaning closer to my desk. The banking system is run by people who are overworked and underpaid. They process thousands of these forms every single day. I knew that if they saw an official embossed state seal from a licensed notary with a matching commission number, they would just push the paperwork through. I used their own bureaucratic laziness against them. It was actually quite brilliant when you think about it. I kept my face perfectly neutral, swallowing the absolute disgust rising in my throat. It is very brilliant, Mom, I agreed softly, feeding her ego so she would keep digging. But what about the journal? You said you wrote down a fake driver license number. What happens when the state auditors come to review your physical book? They do random compliance checks. If they ask to see the identification that matches that number, you will not be able to produce it. My mother let out a light, airy laugh, as if I had just asked a childish question. I am way ahead of you, she boasted. I already reported my notary journal as lost. I went online to the state portal yesterday morning and filed an official affidavit, claiming I left my bag on the subway and my journal was stolen. The state will just void that entire book and issue me a new one. By the time any auditor comes looking for that specific entry, the official record will show that my journal was compromised by an unknown thief. There is literally no paper trail linking me to that specific forged document other than the stamp itself. I stared at her, completely stunned by the layers of her deception. She had not just made a split-second mistake out of misguided love for her daughter. She had premeditated the cover-up. She had filed a false report with the state government to destroy the evidence of her involvement in a federal bank fraud. She had actively obstructed justice, and she was sitting in my office bragging about it like she had just won a game of chess. And the physical stamp, I asked, keeping my voice perfectly level. The one you used to seal the document. If the FBI searches your house, they will find it. They can match the ink composition and the micro imperfections in the rubber stamp directly to the forged paper. My mother patted the heavy leather handbag she had slammed onto my desk earlier. It is right here, she whispered, tapping the side of the bag with a manicured finger. I did not leave it at the house. I brought it with me. Tyler and I agreed that once you erased the computer files, I would go straight to the river downtown and throw the stamp into the water. We have thought of absolutely everything, Kiara. You do not need to worry about us getting caught. We covered all our bases. All you have to do is log into your computer right now and make the digital files disappear. I looked at the leather handbag sitting on my glass desk. Inside that bag was the physical instrument of a federal crime. And my mother had just voluntarily transported it across county lines directly into a federally monitored financial institution. She was practically gift-wrapping the entire prosecution case for the FBI agents listening on the line. Tyler clapped his hands together, rubbing his palms in eager anticipation. Okay, he said, his voice buzzing with nervous energy. You have the whole picture now. You see how airtight our physical plan is. We did our part, Kiara. Now it is time for you to do yours. We are burning daylight here. Every minute we waste talking is another minute Chloe spends in that holding cell surrounded by criminals. Get on the keyboard and do what needs to be done. We are running out of time. I just need you to cooperate right now. Please, Kiara, hurry. I did not move toward my keyboard. I sat perfectly still, watching the frantic energy radiating off him. Tyler reached into the inside pocket of his tailored jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He smoothed it out against the glass surface of my desk and slid it aggressively toward me. It was a standard corporate withdrawal slip. He had clearly taken it from the lobby downstairs before barging into my office. He had already filled out the account routing numbers for the Fulton County bail bondsman. The amount written in blue ink was exactly $60,000. All it needed was my signature on the bottom right line. Sign it, he demanded, tapping his index finger violently against the paper. You sign this slip right now and you hand it to your receptionist. Tell her to expedite the transfer so the funds clear immediately. Once that is done, you lock your office door, you pull up the security mainframe, and you wipe those files. We have been in here for almost 30 minutes, Kiara. The FBI could be tracing the secondary signatures as we speak. I looked down at the withdrawal slip. The sheer physical reality of it, the fact that he actually expected me to sign away the money I had sacrificed years to save, was almost comical in its audacity. You really came prepared, Tyler, I observed softly. You have to be prepared in business, he replied, his tone shifting back to that arrogant tech bro cadence. You have to anticipate roadblocks and have solutions ready to deploy. This is the solution, Kiara. It is the only viable path forward for all of us. Now pick up the pen. My mother leaned forward, her eyes fixed hungrily on the piece of paper. Just do it, honey. She coaxed, her voice dripping with toxic sweetness. It is just money. You can always make more money. But you only have one sister. Do not let your pride destroy our family. We will be out of your hair the second the transfer clears and the digital logs are gone. You will never have to hear about this again. I slowly reached out and picked up the gold pen resting next to my legal pad. I held it between my fingers, feeling the cold metal against my skin. Tyler let out a sharp breath of relief, thinking I was finally submitting to his demands. He checked the heavy silver watch on his left wrist. I am giving you exactly 60 seconds, he announced, his voice suddenly hard and authoritative. He was trying to play the role of the dominant executive taking control of a crisis. I need you to sign that paper and initiate the server wipe right now. We cannot risk any more delays. Every second you hesitate is another chance for the digital forensics team to find the Delaware connection. I am starting the clock, Kiara. Sign the paper. I did not lower the pen to the slip. I just kept holding it, watching him. You are giving me an ultimatum in my own office, I asked, keeping my voice dangerously calm. I am giving you a lifeline, he shot back, glaring at me. 50 seconds. Do not overthink this. You are a smart woman, Kiara. You know the math. If you do not sign that paper, Chloe takes the fall. If she takes the fall, I go down with her. And if I go down, I am taking your mother with me because her notary stamp is on that document. Is your petty little savings account really worth sending your own mother to federal prison? Sign it. My mother gasped, pressing her hand against her chest. Tyler, she whined, looking at him in shock. You said I was protected. You said the Lost Journal report covered me. Nothing is fully protected, Brenda. He snapped at her, completely dropping his respectful son-in-law routine. If the federal agents squeeze Chloe hard enough, she will break. She will tell them everything to get a plea deal. And if she tells them you stamped the paper knowing it was a forgery, we are all going down. So you better pray your daughter signs that slip. 40 seconds, Kiara. The mask was completely gone now. Tyler had just openly threatened to throw my mother to the wolves, and my mother was sitting there paralyzed by the sudden realization that she was entirely disposable to him. The man she had championed, the man she had stolen my college fund to impress, was holding her hostage to force my compliance. You are a monster, my mother whispered, her voice shaking as she stared at Tyler in absolute horror. I am a survivor, Tyler corrected coldly, not even looking at her. I am doing what it takes to protect my assets. 30 seconds, Kiara. Pick up the pace. Are you really going to let your mother go to prison over 60 grand? I looked at my mother. Her eyes were wide with pure terror. For the first time in my life, she was not looking at me with disdain or expectation. She was looking at me with absolute begging desperation. She had finally realized that the golden boy was a sociopath, and that the daughter she had treated like garbage for 3 decades was her only hope for salvation. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She just stared at the gold pen in my hand. 20 seconds, Tyler barked, his face tight with manic anticipation. Sign the damn paper. Save your family. Be the hero for once in your life instead of the bitter, jealous sister. The office was suffocatingly quiet, save for the heavy breathing of my mother and the frantic ticking of the watch Tyler wore. I looked at the withdrawal slip. I looked at the blue ink spelling out the exact amount of money that represented my freedom, my security, and my future home. I looked at the 2 people sitting across from me who had conspired to steal that future and were now demanding that I hand it over willingly to save them from the consequences of their own actions. 10 seconds, Kiara, Tyler warned, leaning his knuckles on the glass desk. Do it now. Sign the paper. 5, 4, 3. I held the pen right above the signature line. Tyler leaned in, his eyes locked on the tip of the pen, waiting for the ink to touch the paper. My mother held her breath. 2. Tyler counted, his voice tight with victory. I looked him dead in the eye. I did not break contact. I did not blink. 1, he whispered, a triumphant smile breaking across his face. I set the pen down gently on the desk and pushed the withdrawal slip back toward him. The piece of paper slid across the smooth glass and bumped gently against his knuckles. 0, I said softly. Tyler stared at the paper and then looked up at me, his smile freezing in place. What are you doing? He asked, his voice suddenly hollow. Sign the paper. I am not signing anything, Tyler, I replied, my voice ringing with absolute finality. I am not paying the bail, I am not logging into the mainframe, and I am certainly not deleting any files. Tyler slammed both his fists onto the glass desk so hard it rattled the framed degrees hanging on my wall. You are making the biggest mistake of your life, he hissed, leaning over the desk until his face was inches from mine. You think you are playing a game, Kiara? I will ruin you. I will walk out of this office, and I will make sure everyone in this city knows you turned your back on your own flesh and blood. You will be a complete pariah. My mother grabbed his arm, trying to pull him back, but he shook her off violently. I did not flinch. I leaned back in my chair and crossed my legs, watching his pathetic display of temper. Ruin me, Tyler, I asked, my voice echoing with pure icy amusement. You cannot even afford to pay your own cell phone bill. You have zero leverage, zero power, and absolutely zero understanding of the situation you are currently standing in. You walked into my office demanding that I fix your mistakes because you actually believed you had the upper hand. You thought you outsmarted me. I stood up slowly, forcing him to look up at me. Let me make something abundantly clear to you, Tyler. You did not ambush me today. I ambushed you. Do you honestly think I just found out about this fraudulent wire transfer when the compliance division called me 10 minutes ago? Do you really believe I was sitting here completely blind while you and my sister tried to raid the trust funds of my clients? Tyler blinked, his aggressive posture faltering for a fraction of a second. What are you talking about? He demanded, his voice losing its confident edge. I am talking about Thanksgiving, I said, pacing slowly behind my desk. I am talking about that little hardware keylogger you ordered off the internet. You thought you were so stealthy. You thought because I was in the kitchen carving a turkey, I was completely oblivious to the security of my own home. But let me tell you a secret about being a Black woman in corporate risk management. We do not survive in this industry by being oblivious. We survive by anticipating every single knife aimed at our backs, especially when those knives are held by our own family. My mother let out a small, suffocated gasp, pressing her hands against her cheeks. Kiara, she whispered, what did you do? I did my job, Mom, I answered, never taking my eyes off Tyler. I noticed the keylogger the second I walked back into my office to put my laptop away on Thursday night. You bought a cheap generic device, Tyler. It was sticking out of the back port like a sore thumb. A first-year information technology student would have spotted it. But I did not remove it. I did not confront Chloe. I did not ruin the holiday dinner by calling the police right then and there. Tyler swallowed hard, taking a slow step backward. Why not? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Because I wanted to see exactly how far you were willing to go. I replied, my tone dropping to a deadly calm. I wanted to know the full extent of your betrayal. So instead of removing the device, I sat down at my keyboard and I intentionally typed in a very specific set of login credentials. I did not give you my actual passwords, Tyler. I gave you the credentials to a digital honeypot. Tyler stared at me, his face draining of all color. A honeypot, he repeated, the tech jargon suddenly turning into a weapon against him. Yes, a honeypot. I smiled, a cold, ruthless smile. It is an isolated sandbox server that our cybersecurity division uses to trap hostile hackers. It looks exactly like our main client database. It has fake account numbers, fake routing codes, and fake balances, but it is completely disconnected from our actual financial assets. The moment Chloe plugged those stolen credentials into her computer, she was not logging into my bank. She was logging directly into a monitored federal surveillance trap. My mother collapsed back into her chair, covering her face as she let out a loud, agonizing wail. We are ruined, she sobbed, rocking back and forth. We are completely ruined. You ruined yourselves, I stated coldly, looking down at her. You made the active choice to steal. I just gave you the rope, and you enthusiastically tied the noose around your own necks. Tyler was hyperventilating now. He grabbed the edge of the glass desk, trying to steady himself. You set us up, he accused, pointing a trembling finger at me. You deliberately framed your own family. You are sick, Kiara. You are a psychopath. I did not frame you, Tyler, I corrected sharply, my voice ringing like a bell in the quiet room. Framing you would imply that you are innocent. I simply allowed you to execute the exact crime you had already premeditated. You brought the keylogger, you forged the signature, Mom stamped the document. You initiated the wire transfer. I did not force you to do any of those things. I just sat back and let the security algorithms record every single second of your sheer stupidity. I walked around the desk and stood directly in front of him. You walked into this office today thinking you were a master manipulator, I said, looking him up and down with absolute disgust. You thought you could use my mother to blackmail me. You thought you could use my sister to steal from me. You thought you could use my race and my gender to intimidate me. But the truth is, Tyler, you are nothing. You are a mediocre con artist who got outplayed by the very woman you thought was beneath you. I pointed to the small, flashing red light on the console of my desk phone. And the best part of this entire encounter, I added softly, is that the federal agents listening on the open security line just heard you explicitly detail exactly how you forged the documents, routed the money offshore, and forced my sister to hit the submit button. They heard Mom admit to filing a false police report about her notary journal. You did not just confess, Tyler. You delivered a comprehensive masterclass on your own guilt. Tyler looked at the flashing red light on the telephone console as if it were a bomb counting down to 0. He finally understood the absolute finality of his situation. There was no corporate jargon left to save him. There was no manipulation tactic that could undo the last 40 minutes of his recorded confession. His chest heaved and his eyes darted frantically toward the heavy glass doors of my office. He was trapped in a cage of his own making. I crossed my arms over my chest and offered him one last look of utter contempt. You wanted to know how the real world operates, Tyler? I asked, my voice echoing with finality. Welcome to the real world. Tyler stood frozen as the words washed over him. The muscles in his jaw worked frantically, but he could not form a single coherent sentence. He slowly sank back into the leather guest chair, staring at me with hollow, empty eyes. The blustering arrogance that had carried him into my office was completely obliterated. My mother was clutching her purse to her chest, as if the expensive leather could somehow shield her from the incoming federal indictments. You see, Tyler? I continued, walking back around my glass desk and taking my seat. You made a fundamental error when you planned this little heist. You assumed you knew what I did for a living because you never actually listened when I talked about my career. You called me a glorified secretary. You assumed I just pushed papers around and answered phone calls for wealthy white men. You never bothered to learn what the director of risk management actually does at a firm that controls $800 million in assets. Let me educate you, I said, leaning forward and folding my hands. My entire job, my singular purpose at this institution, is to anticipate, detect, and neutralize financial threats. I design the security protocols. I audit the transaction algorithms. I am the person the bank relies on to spot a criminal before the money ever leaves the vault. So when you and Chloe attempted to wire $60,000 to a newly formed offshore shell company on a Sunday night, you did not just trip a silent alarm. You set off a digital siren that routed directly to my personal secure server. The automated system flagged the theft 48 hours ago. It took exactly 3 seconds for the artificial intelligence monitoring software to freeze the funds, identify the unauthorized access point, and lock the entire account down. By the time you woke up on Monday morning thinking you were a tech genius, the bank already knew everything. My mother gasped, shaking her head in violent denial. But it was your account, she whimpered, her voice cracking. It was your password, Kiara. Why did they not suspect you? Because, Mom, I replied coldly. I am the one who reported it. When the security alert hit my phone at 2 a.m. on Monday, I logged into the terminal and reviewed the frozen transaction. I saw my own employee identification number attached to the wire. I saw the destination routing code. I saw the scanned authorization form with your perfectly legible notary stamp on it. And do you know what I did? I did not panic. I did not try to delete the files to protect you. I did not call Chloe to warn her. I compiled every single piece of digital evidence into a highly encrypted dossier. I documented the keylogger protocol and the IP access points. I cross-referenced the offshore holding company directly to Tyler. I built a comprehensive airtight prosecution file. And then at 8 o'clock yesterday morning, I personally walked that file into the office of our chief compliance officer and handed it directly to the federal agents. You turned in your own sister! My mother shrieked, her face contorting with a mix of horror and disgust. You handed her over to the police. You threw your own family to the wolves. I did not throw her to the wolves, Mom, I shot back, my voice rising with unyielding authority. She brought the wolves into my home. She sat at my Thanksgiving table, ate the food I cooked, and planted a surveillance device on my computer. She tried to steal the money of my clients to fund the pathetic delusions of a man who refuses to work for a legitimate living. And you validated that theft with your official state seal. You both decided that my career, my freedom, and my future were acceptable collateral damage for your greed. So do not sit there and preach to me about family loyalty. You forfeited the right to use that word the moment you forged my signature. Tyler buried his face in his hands, letting out a pathetic, ragged groan. The reality of the timeline was finally settling into his brain. He realized that the entire time he was planning this confrontation, the entire time he was lecturing me about tech startups and aggressive equity reallocation, I already knew he was a dead man walking. I had already signed his arrest warrant. You let us come in here. He mumbled, his voice muffled by his shaking hands. You let us walk right into this office and talk. You let us confess to everything. Yes, Tyler. I said, my tone perfectly flat. I let you confess. Because I wanted you to understand exactly who defeated you. I wanted you to look me in the eye and show me exactly how little respect you had for me. I needed the federal agents listening on the secure line to hear you attempt to blackmail a bank executive. I needed them to hear you outline your criminal conspiracy step by step. Because wire fraud is a serious charge, but attempting to extort a federal financial officer and soliciting the destruction of corporate evidence will guarantee that the judge denies you bail. You did not just walk into a trap, Tyler. You built the cage, you locked the door from the inside, and you handed me the key. You thought you were the smartest person in the room because society always told you that you were entitled to success without effort. You looked at a black woman holding a position of power, and your immediate instinct was to assume I was incompetent and easily manipulated. But my competence is the only reason the clients of this firm sleep soundly at night. I am the firewall, Tyler, and you just crashed headfirst into it at full speed. The game is completely over now. You have officially lost everything. There is no escape left today. Tyler stared at me, his chest heaving as the weight of my words finally crushed the last remaining fragments of his fragile ego. The heavy silence in the office lasted for only a few seconds before the inevitable happened. Just as I had predicted, his instinct for pure self-preservation violently kicked in. The alliance he had formed with my mother was built entirely on a foundation of convenience and shared entitlement. The moment that foundation cracked, he turned on her with the viciousness of a cornered rat. This was her idea, he shouted, pointing a trembling finger directly at my mother. He backed away from her as if she were suddenly a contagious disease. Brenda orchestrated the entire thing, Kiara. You have to tell the agents on the phone that I was just following her instructions. She is the one who hates you. She has been talking about your savings account for months, saying you did not deserve all that money while Chloe was struggling. She sat at my dining room table and said it was unfair that you had a high-paying corporate job while Chloe was stuck working retail. She planned this to balance the scales. I just provided the technical support because she threatened to kick us out of the apartment she co-signed for us. She forced my hand. My mother gasped, her eyes widening in absolute shock. The man she had defended for years, the golden son-in-law she had placed on a pedestal, far above her own daughter, was now aggressively throwing her directly into the path of a federal train. You lying coward! My mother screamed, her voice cracking with a mixture of heartbreak and absolute fury. She jumped up from the leather guest chair and lunged toward him. You came to us crying about your pathetic little startup. You told Chloe that if she did not help you steal that money, violent loan sharks were going to break your legs. You manipulated my baby girl into betraying her own sister. You told us it was a victimless crime because the bank insurance would cover the lost funds. You swore on the Bible that nobody would ever get caught. Tyler held his hands up, taking another step back toward the glass door. I never said anything about loan sharks, he denied, his voice pitching higher in sheer panic. That is a complete fabrication. You are a bitter old woman who hates her own daughter, and you used me to get to her. You were the one who stamped that document. You told me you had connections at the state level to make the audit disappear. You told me you could handle the physical paperwork because you had been a notary for a decade. I am an entrepreneur, Brenda. I do not forge documents. You did that all on your own. I did not even want to use her account. I wanted to use a corporate lending loophole, but you said Kiara was an easier target because she would be too scared of family backlash to ever report it. My mother let out a sound that was half sob and half growl. An entrepreneur, she mocked, stepping closer to him until she was practically shouting directly in his face. You are a leech. You have not worked a single honest day since you married my daughter. You sleep until noon, you play golf with credit cards you cannot pay off, and you convinced my foolish daughter that you were a misunderstood genius. I knew you were a complete fraud the day you asked me to pay for your wedding cake, but I kept my mouth shut because Chloe loved you. And this is how you repay me. You try to frame me for your miserable little heist. I sat quietly in my chair, watching the two of them absolutely tear each other apart. It was a spectacular psychological implosion. The polite suburban facade, the carefully curated holiday dinner, smiles, the passive-aggressive comments they used to bond over, were all completely gone. They were stripping away every lie they had ever told each other, revealing the ugly, hollow truth underneath. This was the grim reality of a toxic family. There was no loyalty, there was no unconditional love. There was only mutual parasitism, and the moment the host's body fought back, the parasites began consuming each other just to survive. Tyler realized arguing with her was not going to save him from a prison sentence, so he turned his attention back to the flashing red light on my desk console. He lunged toward my desk, leaning heavily over the glass, his face slick with desperate sweat. "Agent Reynolds!" he yelled, practically begging into the speakerphone. "Agent Reynolds, you have to listen to me. I am a victim here. Chloe has severe mental health issues, and her mother is a controlling narcissist. They threatened to ruin my business reputation if I did not provide the offshore routing numbers. I was under extreme duress. I will testify against both of them. I will give you everything you need to lock them up for a decade. I have text messages proving they premeditated the Thanksgiving dinner visit just to steal the passwords. Just give me immunity. I will be your star witness. I will wear a wire. I will do whatever you want." My mother grabbed him by the shoulder and violently yanked him backward. Her perfectly manicured nails dug deeply into his expensive suit jacket. "Do not you dare listen to this pathetic little boy," she screamed toward the phone, her perfectly styled hair now a tangled mess around her face. "He is the mastermind. He bought the spying device. He installed it on the computer of my daughter. He forged the signature. I only stamped it because he threatened to divorce Chloe and leave her with all his massive credit card debt. He coerced me. I am a respectable citizen with absolutely no criminal record. I go to church every Sunday. He is the one you want. He is a con artist who preyed on a vulnerable family." Tyler shoved her hand off his shoulder, his face twisted with pure, unfiltered hatred. "Keep your hands off me, you crazy old bat," he hissed. "You are just mad because your golden child is finally going to realize that her mother is a federal criminal. You ruined both of your daughters. One is a convicted felon, and the other one is the person sending you to prison. You have absolutely nothing left." "Enough," I said, my voice slicing through their pathetic screaming match like a heavy blade. They both froze instantly, turning to look at me, panting and sweating, their eyes wide with blind panic. "You are both wasting your breath," I told them. leaning back and crossing my arms over my chest. Agent Reynolds is not going to offer either of you immunity. The FBI does not need a star witness when they already have the digital footprints, the physical evidence, and a clear audio recording of both of you freely confessing to your individual roles in this conspiracy. You are not negotiating a business deal, Tyler. You are just providing the prosecution with additional evidence of your complete lack of remorse. And Mom screaming that you go to church does not magically cancel out conspiracy to commit bank fraud. The speakerphone on my desk emitted a sharp electronic beep before the line went completely dead. Agent Reynolds did not need to hear another word. He had everything he required to close the net. Tyler lunged toward the desk again, but before his hands could even touch the glass, a loud, heavy knock echoed through the room. It was not the polite, tentative knock of my receptionist. It was a firm, demanding strike against the heavy glass door of my office. Tyler froze his head, whipping around toward the entrance. My mother let out a terrified squeak and shrank back into her leather chair. Through the frosted glass panels of the wall, we could see multiple large silhouettes moving quickly down the hallway. The door swung open violently, hitting the rubber stopper on the floor with a loud thud. 4 men stepped into my office. They were not wearing the gray blazers of our corporate building security team. They were wearing dark windbreakers with the bright yellow letters FBI printed boldly across the back. The man leading the group was tall, broad-shouldered, and possessed an expression of absolute stone. He looked exactly like the deep, authoritative voice that had just been echoing from my speakerphone. Marcus, our chief compliance officer, stepped into the room right behind him holding a digital tablet and looking at Tyler with profound professional disgust. "Good afternoon?" The lead agent said, his voice filling the room and completely sucking the remaining oxygen from the lungs of Tyler. "I am Special Agent Reynolds." Tyler took one look at the federal badges hanging from their belts and completely lost his mind. His knees buckled and he stumbled backward, crashing into the glass wall. He threw his hands up in the air, his palms facing the agents in a gesture of frantic surrender. "Wait!" he screamed, his voice cracking in terror. "You have this all wrong. I was just leaving. I am not part of this. She forced me to come here." He pointed a shaking finger at my mother, who was too paralyzed by fear to even defend herself. Agent Reynolds did not even blink. He walked slowly into the center of the office, his eyes locked on Tyler. "We heard the entire conversation on the secure line, Tyler," he said, his tone entirely devoid of sympathy. "We heard you detail the keylogger installation. We heard you admit to forging the signature. We heard you attempt to extort a federal financial officer. You are not leaving this building today. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit federal wire fraud, extortion, and money laundering." 2 agents stepped around the desk and moved swiftly toward Tyler. Tyler tried to push himself along the wall, his expensive leather shoes slipping on the hardwood floor. "Do not touch me," he yelled, trying to pull his arm away. "I want a lawyer. You cannot do this to me. I am the founder of a technology company." The agents ignored his pathetic blustering. One agent grabbed his left arm, twisting it firmly but professionally behind his back. The other agent grabbed his right wrist. Tyler let out a loud, undignified yelp as they pushed him face first against the glass wall. The cold metal handcuffs clicked loudly, locking his wrists together. The sound echoed sharply in the quiet office. The arrogant white knight, the brilliant tech entrepreneur who thought he could outsmart the entire federal banking system, was now pressed against the glass, crying real tears and whining about his wrists, hurting. Agent Reynolds turned his attention to my mother. She was hyperventilating, her hands clamped tightly over her mouth. She looked like a cornered animal, realizing there was absolutely no escape. "Brenda," he said, stepping toward her, "we also heard you admit to filing a false police report regarding your official state notary journal. We heard you confess to stamping a forged document. Please stand up and place your hands behind your back." My mother slowly lowered her hands from her face. She looked at the federal agent, and then she looked at me. Her eyes were completely wild. "Kiara," she begged, her voice a high-pitched wail. Tell them I am a good person. Tell them I did not mean to do it. Please, Kiara, I am your mother. You cannot let them put me in handcuffs. I sat quietly in my leather chair, my hands folded neatly on my desk. I did not move. I did not blink. I am not the one who put you in those handcuffs, Mom. I replied, my voice steady and cold. You did that the moment you decided my future was worth less than the ego of your son-in-law. Agent Reynolds reached down and picked up the heavy leather handbag sitting on my desk. He opened the brass clasp and looked inside. He reached in and pulled out the brand new self-inking state notary seal. My mother let out a devastated sob, as the physical evidence of her crime was secured by the federal government. She stood up, her legs shaking so violently she could barely support her own weight. An agent stepped behind her and gently guided her arms backward. The second set of handcuffs clicked shut. My mother squeezed her eyes shut and began to weep uncontrollably. The polished suburban matriarch who cared so deeply about appearances and social status was now standing in the middle of a corporate office in federal restraints. Tyler was still mumbling incoherently against the glass wall. The agents pulled him back to his feet. He looked disheveled, his expensive tie, crooked, his suit jacket rumpled. Agent Reynolds looked at both of them and began reciting their Miranda rights in a calm, methodical voice. You have the right to remain silent, he stated as the agents began walking them toward the door. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I watched as they were marched out of my office. Through the glass walls, I could see the entire bullpen of financial advisors standing at their desks. Dozens of my colleagues were watching in absolute dead silence as the two criminals were paraded through the center of the trading floor. It was the ultimate public humiliation. Tyler kept his head down, trying to hide his face from the staring crowd. My mother just wept, her shoulders shaking with every step. They disappeared through the main security doors, their toxic presence finally completely removed from my life. Marcus stepped forward and placed his digital tablet on my desk. He looked at me with deep professional respect. You handled that perfectly, Kiara, he said quietly. The firm owes you a massive debt of gratitude. I picked up my gold pen and prepared to sign the official incident report. I did not feel sad. I did not feel guilty. I just felt completely and wonderfully free. I signed the incident report with a steady hand and handed it back to Marcus. For the first time in my entire life, the suffocating weight of my toxic family was completely gone. I did not shed a single tear as the elevator doors closed and took them down to the lobby. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of federal depositions, legal briefings, and sworn statements. The wheels of the justice system often move slowly, but when they involve a massive digital footprint, a clear paper trail, and a high-definition audio recording of a full confession, they grind exceedingly fast. The federal prosecutors did not even need my testimony to build an airtight case. The trial was not really a trial at all. It was an absolute slaughter. Tyler tried to hire a high-powered defense attorney, but because his accounts were frozen and his fake technology startup was publicly exposed as a complete sham, he ended up with an overworked public defender. His lawyer strongly advised him to take a plea deal and throw himself on the mercy of the court. But Tyler refused. His arrogant tech bro ego simply could not accept the reality that he had been outsmarted by the very black woman he had spent years talking down to. He took the case to a federal judge, and it was the worst mistake of his miserable life. Sitting in the courtroom, I watched calmly as the prosecution played the security recording from my office. The judge listened to Tyler bragging about forging my signature, attempting to extort me, and ordering the destruction of corporate evidence. The judge was distinctly unimpressed by his disruptive business model. Tyler was sentenced to 8 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of early parole. He actually cried when the bailiffs put the heavy chains around his waist and led him out of the courtroom. The smug white knight was reduced to nothing more than an inmate number. Chloe did what she always did when faced with the consequences of her own actions. She played the victim. She sobbed hysterically on the witness stand, claiming that Tyler had mentally abused her and brainwashed her into stealing from me. She looked up at my mother in the gallery, expecting the matriarch of the family to swoop in and save her from the fire, just like she had done with my college fund so many years ago. But my mother had absolutely no power in a federal courtroom. The judge clearly noted that Chloe had physically planted the keylogger hardware and actively initiated the wire transfer. Being a gullible and willing participant in a felony is not a valid legal defense. My sister, the precious golden child who was always given everything on a silver platter, was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Her days of maxing out platinum credit cards and driving luxury cars were officially over. And then there was my mother. The woman who had spent 33 years protecting Chloe at my expense finally had to pay the ultimate price for her toxic favoritism. The state authorities revoked her notary public commission, immediately permanently banning her from ever holding a financial or legal license again. The federal judge decided not to give her actual prison time due to her advanced age and lack of prior criminal convictions, but the financial penalties handed down were absolutely devastating. She was hit with massive federal fines and ordered to pay full restitution for the investigative costs incurred by my firm. The legal defense fees completely drained her retirement accounts. Within 6 months, my mother was forced to file for total bankruptcy. She lost her beautiful suburban home, the one she cared so deeply about impressing her wealthy friends with. All of her country club friends completely abandoned her the moment her face appeared in the local newspaper. She now lives in a tiny, cramped one-bedroom apartment on the extreme outskirts of the city, serving 5 years of strict federal probation. She tried to call me from a borrowed prepaid phone a few months ago, crying and begging for a small loan to help with her rent. I did not even say a single word. I just blocked the number, went back to drinking my morning coffee, and watched the sunrise. I kept the promise I made to myself. I took that $60,000, the exact money they tried so desperately to steal from me, and I put a down payment on a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a quiet, secure, gated community. It has massive floor-to-ceiling windows, a wrap-around porch, and a sprawling kitchen where I can cook holiday dinners without constantly looking over my shoulder to see who is betraying me. I changed my phone number. I deleted all of my old social media profiles. I completely and permanently severed the dead toxic branches of my family tree. I do not visit them in prison. I do not send them commissary money. I do not answer letters. And most importantly, I do not feel a single ounce of guilt. Sometimes society tells us that we have to endure abuse simply because the people hurting us happen to share our bloodline. We are told to keep the peace, to turn the other cheek, and to sacrifice our own well-being to protect the toxic secrets of our relatives. We are told to pay the invisible tax of family loyalty, no matter how high the cost. But family is supposed to be a safe harbor, not a sinking ship that demands you drown with them just to prove you care. I chose to save myself. I built an entirely new life, surrounded by genuine friends who support me, colleagues who respect my professional expertise, and a partner who treats me as an absolute equal. I created my own family of choice, and the profound peace I feel when I lock the doors of my beautiful home at night is worth infinitely more than any amount of money in the world. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my story today. Have you ever had to draw a hard line and completely cut off a toxic family member to protect your own peace and your future? How did you find the inner strength to finally walk away from the manipulation? I would absolutely love to hear your experiences and read your stories in the comments below. If you found my journey empowering, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about setting firm boundaries and reclaiming your life. Share this video with anyone who might need a strong reminder that it is perfectly okay to walk away from people who disrespect you, even if they are family. Remember, your success is your own, your peace is non-negotiable, and you never have to apologize for protecting the life you have built. Stay strong and always know your true worth. The most profound lesson to take away from Kiara's intense journey is that sharing a bloodline does not obligate you to endure abuse, and setting firm boundaries is an act of survival, not selfishness. Society, especially within many close-knit cultural communities, heavily conditions us to believe that family loyalty must be absolute and unconditional. We are often taught to absorb the reckless mistakes of our relatives, to pay the invisible tax of familial obligation, and to repeatedly set ourselves on fire just to keep our toxic family members warm. However, Kiara's story powerfully shatters that harmful misconception. It teaches us that when a family dynamic is built entirely on manipulation, deceit, and entitlement, refusing to play the role of the sacrificial lamb is the healthiest, most empowering choice you can make. Her mother and brother-in-law weaponized her sense of duty, fully expecting her to surrender years of hard-earned financial independence to cover up a federal crime they committed. They confused her grace for weakness and viewed her professional success not with pride but as a community asset they could freely raid. The candid reality is that toxic people will always project their own guilt onto you when you finally stop enabling their destructive behavior. By putting the pen down and letting the authorities handle the consequences, Kiara demonstrated that true self-worth requires protecting your peace at all costs. You absolutely do not owe your future to people who actively try to destroy it. Your success is yours to safeguard, and sometimes the only way to truly thrive is to sever the ties dragging you under and build a chosen family rooted in genuine respect. Are you ready to stop letting guilt dictate your life and finally set your own non-negotiable boundaries today?